morning, everyone. My name is Danny. I am here with Territory Foods and Chef Kevin. We are super excited to chat with you today. As most of you know, we are launching a couple of new meals on the menu, one of which is designed by Chef Kevin here. We're going to talk a little bit about that, learn a little bit about his background, and ask a couple fun questions. So thank you so much for being here. We are so excited for these meals. I know we're still a couple weeks away from it being live on the menu, but I loved yours and I'm counting down the minutes. So introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, give the people just a little bit of background.
I'm Kevin Gillespie. I'm the chef and owner of the Redbeard Restaurant Group based out of Atlanta. So most people don't know the name of the company, but we own and operate a number of restaurants here, including Gun Show, which a lot of folks know about, Revival, Terminus City, Game Changer, Communion, Oh Reliable, I'm sure Cold Beer. I feel like I'm forgetting a few, but yeah, so based out of Atlanta. Grew up in and around Atlanta, started my cooking career here, have had a chance to travel around the country cooking for a lot of really great chefs, but ended up back here in the mid-2000s, and that's where I've sort of been building the career from.
That's so cool. Yeah, we've obviously done a little bit of research, and I've never been to Atlanta, but
How is that possible? I feel like if you've flown anywhere in the United States, you have to have gone to Atlanta.
I don't know. You'd think I'd just have never left my little apartment, but no, I'm looking forward to getting there soon. I've heard wonderful things about your company and your restaurants, and so really excited to kind of get out that way. But we get to bring a taste of it to the rest of Territory customers, which is exciting. So tell us a little bit about just your culinary background. How did you get into culinary arts? What did that journey look like for you?
Yeah, it was a little bit abstract, I guess. So I grew up in a small town, and if you were a teenager and you needed a job, there wasn't a lot of things you could do. We had a little tiny restaurant attached to a grocery store called the Chicken Coop, and the Chicken Coop made buffalo wings and fried chicken and chicken just all deep fried stuff. And myself and my best friend both worked there, and so that was my first foray into cooking. And on kind of slow nights when we weren't doing anything, we would just experiment. Because we were attached to a grocery store, we'd just go out to the store and buy things and then come back into this little teeny tiny restaurant. And when I say tiny, smaller than my kitchen in my house is. And we would just experiment with stuff. And we came up with all kinds of crazy, goofy things when we were teenagers. And I loved it. I really enjoyed cooking. I liked the process of the creativity. And I had really liked it my whole life. I was telling my parents when I was 6 or 7 years old that I wanted to be a chef when I grew up. I loved watching cooking shows. I was just sort of obsessed with the idea of creating and making. But it's not what I thought I would do for a living. I definitely had a more traditional sort of collegiate, academic path in mind. And I just didn't find the same sort of gratification from that as I did from the daily sort of ever-changing experience of being in a restaurant and of having to sort of make something, I guess you'd say. Just really comes down to that. I liked this idea of crafting and creating. And so I decided that I was going to take a little bit of time before launching into sort of a more traditional career, that I was going to try this whole cooking thing out for a little while. And I've never turned back. I just loved it. I loved the difficulty that came along with it. And I've been fortunate that, because I guess maybe just because of the way I am as a person, I said, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to try to do it for the best possible. I'm going to really throw myself into it. And I've been fortunate that I was able to work for some incredibly talented chefs in really great places. And so I've had a great education in the culinary world, and really latched on to that sort of independent restaurant thing from a pretty early part of my career. I liked the freedom that brought, and frankly, I liked the challenges. I thought it was probably the hardest path I could take, and I seemed to be the most persistent traveler on the road less taken. So I enjoyed that facet of it, and just committed when I was, I must have been 19 or 20 years old when I said, one day I'm going to have my own restaurant. And so I have. I bought my first restaurant when I was 25, and have been sort of really growing ever since then.
that's so full circle. I love to hear that. Like, not a lot of people can say that they know what they want to do now as adults, but do what they wanted to do at that young age. And I think it's awesome that you're where you are today after knowing all of that. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, my mom was, most of folks probably assumed that my parents were really disappointed, when the options were two very, very different things. But actually not. My mom has been famous for saying that she was really glad that I recognized what I was actually meant to do before I'd spent too much time doing something else that really wasn't for me.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people, again, just like I said, like, you're so lucky in that instance. There's so many people that figure out what they want to do at halfway through their career, about to start over, or you just don't,
I may still do that too. Let's not put it past me. There may be like year 45 where I'm like, I think I'm going to do something else in my life.
Just a complete 180.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Cool. So I have a couple like fun questions. Don't want to like get too. So they've been a little difficult in the past, but let's be. Okay. We'll just take them for fun. So. Okay. What is one of the, and this can be like in recent years, what's the best meal you've had in the last like couple of years?
Oh man. Well, it's okay. So fair enough. Like the last year hasn't amounted to a lot of really phenomenal meals. But I certainly have memories of some of the best meals that I've ever had in my life. And I think perhaps a meal at 11 Madison Park a few years ago was quite possibly one of the best I've ever had in my life. It really, what it did more than anything was remind me why we fight so hard and get so crazy about things being done a certain way, because that restaurant was so purposeful. Every single thing was purposeful, but I don't mean that to sound like it was overdone. It wasn't heavy-handed. It was actually really fun, but nothing was on accident. And it reminded me, sort of validated to a certain degree, why when we go to work every day, we just put so much into something that some people would just say is just dinner, and kind of brush it aside. So I think that was certainly one of the absolute best that I've had. I also had a meal in New Zealand at a place called Anisfield a couple of years ago that I think could quite possibly be, it was easily in the top 5 best meals I've had in my life. The chef there, Vaughn Maccabee, is I follow him on Instagram now, because after eating there, and this was sort of a blind walk-in, I wasn't even sure what I was getting into. People said, oh yeah, you'll like it. You're a chef, you'll like that place. And so we just went, and I had no idea what I was getting into. And I think that, if he doesn't make it into the Pellegrino top 50 within the next year, I'd be shocked. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's somewhere in the top 10, because it's phenomenal.
That's awesome. Well, I'm adding to my travel bucket list. Gotta get to both of them. Well, in the same line of question, what is your favorite thing that you've made? Like, what is something that you succeeded at making that you were just super proud of?
Well, it's funny. It's probably not the answer that most people expect of like a professional chef, but I think I get the most satisfaction out of making something that people have had a million times and just trying to make it more memorable, like a better version of something that you've had a lot. In doing this for now 20 plus years for a living, I've come to the realization that the most memorable things that I've ever eaten in my life are the things that I at least had some sort of cursory understanding of, and I could easily in my mind look at other places or other times I had something similar, and I could grade it on this sort of very fast mental scale. And so I think about the food I grew up with as a Southerner, and a lot of that food is deceptively simple, and unfortunately nowadays a lot of it is done very, very poorly. People don't really put the effort into doing them because there's frozen and canned versions of nearly all of this home cooking, and a lot of people have grown to believe that is what I'm talking about when I say these things. And so I think having the opportunity to refine something as simple as cornbread, like, a staple of Southern food, literally one of the most important foods historically for Southerners, and execute a version that I would argue is the absolute pinnacle of what it can be. That's probably something I'm more proud of than most anything else I've done in my career, because it took a lot of time and it took a lot of energy it's harder to refine down something with so few moving parts than it is something really elaborate. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit when you do ultra complex food that you can just say, this isn't very good, this can go away, or this could be made better. But when you get down to things that have 3, 4, 5 ingredients, it gets really hard to refine anywhere past that. And so when you can, it's really rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, I love that answer. I think there's always just like you said, the thought of like something really intricate or unique or different. Those are obviously great. And it's so exciting as like a consumer to like look at a meal and I would have never thought to put that together. But
Right.
for me, it's also equally exciting to be like, that's the best chicken soup I've ever had. And I've
Right.
had it 1,000 times.
Yeah,
I will
exactly.
remember this one because of these things.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is that I have restaurants that do both. You know, Gun Show is all about doing something you've never seen and really pushing you out of your comfort zone. And it can be very memorable in its totality more often than not. People really remember Gun Show as a total experience.
Yeah.
They have a hard time remembering any of the food we serve them because they don't have anything to connect it with. Whereas Revival is extremely stripped down, very traditional Southern food. And day after day after day, people leave there saying, I've eaten a lot of meatloaf in my life because everyone has, but I've never really thought much of it other than it was just dinner until this. Or, you know, and to me, that's very powerful because I personally think it's harder to do that as a chef than it is to do the extremely intense food that overwhelms you emotionally. So those are always easy to have memories of. I think when you're talking about something that you've had a million of, it's really hard to be a blip on the radar.
Totally. I mean, people kind of connect it back to, people always connect food back to memory.
Right.
Or, so like you speak of meatloaf, and if you tried to make me meatloaf, I'd be like, well, you know, my mom makes it really good.
Exactly.
Too. That's what I remember.
Yep,
You kind of
exactly.
compete with people's like life stories and memories with food. It's tough, and so I admire that, definitely. So let's get in a little bit to your time on Top Chef. I think a lot of people at Territory are going to recognize you from your time on that show. You did so well. You've been on it a couple times, right?
Yeah.
Did very well each time. So what was that like for you? I mean, it sounds like you like the difficulty of cooking, and I can't imagine anything more difficult than cooking in a short time on TV.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, you know, Top Chef is interesting. It's kind of polarizing inside my own head. I really enjoy the challenge of it. I definitely enjoy competing in life. I competed as an athlete for most of my life. I'm a little old now to do that, but so I've always enjoyed competing. I get a lot of gratification out of that. But Top Chef is really hard for an element that no one really sees at home, or perhaps they see it but don't recognize it, which is there's a mental component to Top Chef that is very, very difficult. And especially for someone like me who is quite a bit more introverted perhaps than some of my peers, living in a house with 17 strangers and being in constant daily interaction with them is, in my opinion, the hardest part of Top Chef. I think that is the piece that gives me the most difficulty. And in fact, I would say it's the piece that has affected me or produced maybe the most negative results for me in Top Chef. The days that I struggle tend to be the days that I wake up and I'm just like, I can't handle all of this. And then I bring that into the kitchen with me. You know, whereas the cooking part, I joke and say like the cooking part's the easy part, but it is. It's like, it's the part that we all know. Like I've done nothing but cook professionally for so long that the cooking part is really not nearly as hard as the like gamesmanship part of Top Chef or the mental sort of stamina part of Top Chef.
Yeah, that's the first answer that's been about that piece of it, and it's so fascinating. I'm very similar to you. I'm an introvert. You recharge alone. I used to say I'd always wanted to be on Real World. And I look back and I'm like, no.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like there's a lot of times on Top Chef where you'll sort of look, you'll be watching it and you're like, oh, Kevin's not in that room at that time. Like, that's not an accident. Like, the minute I think I can sneak away and like go to my bedroom and just be alone, I have to, because like you said, as an introvert, like otherwise, like I have no way to recharge. Like, I need that space, that mental space. And I actually think that is, for the people who are like us, I think that's the hardest part about Top Chef, because it makes it really hard to compete day in and day out when you haven't had that mental space, and it doesn't exist on Top Chef. It's just not a thing these days.
Wow, I mean, that I truly can't imagine. Hearing that from you makes looking back and watching the show just that much more interesting. You don't think about what you guys do after you leave the kitchen or after you stop filming, essentially. And
yeah. And when you realize that you really don't stop filming, that they film you, I mean, I think the average is like you're pushing 20 hours a day of filming. So it's just, you're really not ever not being filmed or recorded. So that to me is the hardest part about Top Chef, like hands down. So I'm sure other people will say like it's the challenges, it's the this, it's the that. And I suppose it's all in the eyes of the beholder. But for me, it was always that other part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, keeping in line with that, what, if you kind of look back, and it can be over any season that you're on, what would your biggest takeaway or like your biggest lesson that you learned while on the show?
Well, I think that there's a couple of them. I think the first is that you really, really have to trust your instincts when you're approaching any challenge. Whether you want to call it gut or whatever your phrasing is, but generally speaking, people get themselves in trouble when they talk themselves into doing something that they don't feel comfortable doing or that doesn't really sit well with them. That's usually a very, very bad thing. Like, you need to trust your instincts. If your instincts are saying there's no way that dish can be done in this amount of time, or that's not really the right choice for this service setting, then you need to walk away from that idea immediately. And sometimes people get way too caught up in the challenge. They just keep going over the challenge over and over again in their head, and they're going, no, I have to make this thing. Rarely do people get sent home on Top Chef for really great food. I have to add, I used to say never. I say rarely now, because having competed on All Stars, people got sent home for really good food from the very first day. So there certainly was like an element of capturing the challenge better that certainly came into play. But generally, you should trust your gut. I would say that's the very first sort of thing that you learn about Top Chef. The second is recognizing and this gets really into the gamesmanship of it. Because you are being recorded at all times, there are production people listening all the time. And if you talk too much or if you have to be very careful what you choose to say and not to say. And I don't mean being guarded. I just mean that if you talk about how you absolutely hate making pasta and are not good at making pasta, you will find yourself having to make pasta very soon. And I am the victim of that. Like, I got sent home in All Stars on not particularly well-made pasta. The challenge started as a bean or pasta challenge, and I think I didn't shut up about the fact that I was like, well, at least I can make beans, because I can nail it. I'm from the South, like, we eat tons of beans. And then miraculously, like 6 hours later, they were like, sorry, that was a typo. It's a pasta challenge. And you're like, of course it is. So be careful.
I mean, I think good lessons outside of Top Chef too, just trusting who you are and your thought, with your gut.
Yeah, and don't just say everything you're thinking out loud. Yeah, that's a general good life lesson.
Yeah, I would think so. So, okay, let's get into the food. What was your favorite thing that you made while on either season of Top Chef?
Either season. There's been a lot of good ones. I think this last season, there were quite a few really good ones. And in fact, actually, one of the ones that I made has propelled this meal forward. So I really love the cabbage dish that Melissa and I made for the museum challenge in All Stars. I thought it was a really phenomenal vegetable-driven dish. It was really, really, I thought, very clever and very well done. In the very first season that I competed on, which was like about 1 million years ago, I did a deconstructed chicken mole negro because we had to do a deconstruction challenge. And I thought honestly, like, that was a total cooking from the hip. I know the traditional dish really, really well, so that was very much a cooking from the hip, instinctual cooking, and it came out phenomenal. I was really, really proud of that dish. Those are probably two of my favorites, but perhaps my most favorite came from this past season, and it was when I had an opportunity to produce Country Captain, which is a very important dish to where I am from. It's one of the few, with Southern food, it can be very hard to sort of titrate down where this dish originated, where it belongs, historically speaking. But this one is very much Georgia. There is really no debating that. And so producing that dish in the restaurant pitch episode was wonderful. I was really proud of that dish. Now, if I had realized in that particular moment that I was now committing to making that dish on a restaurant level for hundreds of people, I probably would have changed my mind, because it's not a dish that translates particularly well in its ultra traditional form to being done for a ton of people. So working with you guys has been kind of fun, because obviously we had to figure out how to make it for a lot of folks. And I'm really proud of this version that we are able to share with people now.
Yeah, that's a great segue into talking about the meal. So as most of you know, again, we are partnering with Chef Kevin here. We're going to be bringing his meal to life on the territory menu, the Country Captain, just like you mentioned. We are going to have two versions of it, one with chicken, and then we're going to have a vegan version as well. So all of our customers have an opportunity to try your cooking. So let's dig into it a little bit. Yeah. Tell us about the components. Tell us what customers are going to taste when they get your meal.
Well, so Country Captain is a really peculiar dish. First of all, it has a cool name, but the name really has very little to do with what the dish actually is. Country Captain is, if you put on your historian hat for a moment here, it's arguably maybe the United States' first taste of curry, of that sort of palette of flavors in cooking. So this is a dish that originates out of Savannah, out of the port of Savannah, and it is basically in its very, very traditional form, it is a whole chicken that is stewed in a tomato-based curry that then has elements of Madeira and raisins and almonds kind of all added in there. So it's got a lot of nuance and a lot going on. It's traditionally served over a particular kind of rice that grows in this region. That's a short grain rice that is cooked with a lot of saffron and turmeric. It was a very expensive dish. This would have been something only really able to be served in the homes of people who were rather affluent, because it required you to go out and get just a laundry list of ingredients that all during the 1700s would have been prohibitively expensive, as you can imagine. Now, for us at least, I think we use the term Country Captain anytime we're talking about that sort of Americanized chicken curry. And so what we have done here with you guys is that we have taken a lot of those flavor profiles, but we've also eliminated some of the very traditional ingredients. Like, for example, traditional Country Captain is always cooked in bacon grease. You cook the chicken in it, you cook the vegetables in it. Well, we took that away because we wanted more people to be able to try this. But we then had to bring that element of flavor back in, which was really, really challenging. So what we have now is, rather than a whole cut up chicken where the breasts are kind of dry and the legs are maybe really good, we've gone with a more of just a braised chicken with those flavors in there. You still get the currants and you still get the almonds. We're using a product called Right Rice instead of regular rice, because we wanted to be able to bring some protein to the vegan version, and then I just liked it enough that we brought it into the meat-centric version as well. And it's really nice because you still get a sense of what this dish was all about. You don't get the pomp and circumstance of the 8-course meal served at a fancy dining room table like you were, in fact, a sea captain from the 1700s. But I think you get, what I like about this meal is that I like to think that people will eat it and find it very delicious and satiating. But then I also think it might prompt them to learn more about the origin of this dish and maybe experiment at home and try the much more complicated, much more elaborate version perhaps for themselves. I don't think that there's anything about our meal that will leave you wanting more, but I also think that it's such a cool story that maybe it will propel people to sort of experiment and to learn a little bit more about Southern food, which is certainly something I care a lot about.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I promise you I will try to make the original version at home. I love doing stuff like that. So one here. So there's a lot of, like you mentioned, a couple different components to the meal. especially the one that's coming to life on the territory menu. If you had to pick like a favorite part or the most unique part, like I know I love the pickled green tomatoes.
Right.
I've never had pickled green tomatoes. I think they're great and they add such a like brightness to the meal. What would be your favorite kind of component about it?
Well, that might be it, because the pickled green tomatoes are actually, they're something we call chow chow. That's what what that component is called in the South. And so traditionally, when you have country captain, as I said, you'd have like this really sort of, there'd be a lot of dishes on the table. It wouldn't just be one thing. And one of those things that would be on the table are always pickles and relishes, something with some acidity and some crunch and some bite that helps cut through the richness of the other food. And so we weren't able to do 10 of them, but we were able to do one. And so we chose that green tomato chow chow, which of course we're just calling pickled green tomatoes so people don't think of dog chow, maybe, but, and it's really fun because it really does add a nice contrasting touch because of temperature, because you keep it cold and then eat it cold as you're eating the hot meal, but then also because of the crunch and the acidity. I also really love the solution to the bacon grease thing that we came up with. I love the fact that we were able to smoke mushrooms and then incorporate them into the dish to bring that element of smokiness that you have to have. I tried making the dish without just leaving bacon out and cooking it, but it's missing a depth of flavor that it traditionally has. And I think that the smoked mushroom was really the answer. And it's actually how we ended up with the vegan version, is that it was so good that it felt like it could be a standalone. And that's hard when you're a chef who is, like a dyed-in-the-wool carnivore like I am. It's hard to build vegan food. Maybe not, vegetarian isn't nearly as hard, but build vegan food that hits those same notes of satiating quality. But I know this does. I've eaten both of them side by side, and I don't really have a favorite of the two.
That's interesting. I've tried them both too, and I'm similar. I think I loved the mushroom edition, and I think this is, again, a testament to kind of what you were speaking to earlier of taking something pretty traditional and trying to figure out a different way to bring it to life and show that there's different components out in this world that can be just as delicious in a more non-traditional way. So
yeah.
Awesome. We are, again, so excited to have this meal on the menu. Everyone on the Territory family will be able to try it, both versions. Again, we will keep you all posted when that's coming live, but just in a few short weeks. Stay tuned. So Kevin, tell our audience what's up next. Like, what else you got going on?
Well, this is something I'm super proud of. So obviously we've dealt with all of the problems that everyone else has dealt with through COVID, and we've had our struggles and our ups and downs, but we've been okay as a company for the most part. However, a lot of folks inside sort of the greater food service world and in Atlanta are not okay, and they have really been struggling. And so we were able to work on a project through most of sort of 2020 that has evolved into 2021. And this project is now called the Defend Southern Food Foundation. So we have formed our own charitable organization. We are producing between 200 and 300,000 meals a year that we are donating to the families of Atlanta public school children that are in need. We've worked with the school social workers and counselors to identify the families who really are struggling right now, and we're bringing them dinner. We want to provide these families an opportunity to sit down and have a meal together, something that that's both nourishing and satisfying, but also something that hopefully can bring a sense of community and hope. And then in doing so, we've also been able to work on another sort of, I guess, outstanding issue that we're having, which is that the farmers and the producers that are inside our network that have produced the ingredients that we use in our restaurants for years, the locally raised and locally produced products, have also been struggling because they don't have those restaurant partnerships that they used to have. So we're able to take our funding and purchase those ingredients and then transform them into these meals. And so not only are we helping our local economy by injecting capital into our local food source, our local sort of food network of producers and purveyors, but we're also able to turn that into really nutritious and really satisfying meals that hopefully can lift people's day up just a little bit more. And I'm really proud of that project. So the Defend Southern Food Foundation is our newest and our latest and greatest, and I really think that all of 2021 will be dedicated to refining the mission and then growing the amount of families that we can hope to serve.
That's so wonderful. Is there ways for people that they can kind of get involved and help you out? I'd love to be able to share that in the links below if possible.
Absolutely. So you can check us out on Defend Southern Food Foundation on Instagram. Actually on all social media networks. And then our new site will launch within, I guess, in a couple weeks here. Probably to coincide with the meal launch, really. DefendSouthernFoodFoundation.org. And you can find a lot of information about who we're serving and how we're doing this, as well as links to be able to donate financially if you do so wish to, or to donate time and volunteer. I mean, this is a project that's really accessible to people. It costs $10 to feed a person one day. And it's really, so that amount of money, and that's $10 to feed them buying the same kind of ingredients that we use in our restaurants. So yeah, people can go check us out, Defend Southern Food on social media, all the social media platforms. Also the Defend Southern Food Foundation.org online. We have a new site launching with a lot of stories about the families that we are helping and the purveyors that we are helping. Really, it's meant to just be a story to inspire people to recognize that this is doable in any community around America. These problems exist everywhere. These are not unique to Atlanta, and we are addressing a very, very small amount of our population. So our goal is that people will be inspired by this, that they'll take our playbook and then use it in their own community. And so I encourage people to go check it out. There'll be links to donate, whether that's time or money, whatever you feel capable of. It's $10 a day to support your neighbor. Really, it's less than the cost of a cocktail in our restaurants to buy your neighbor dinner. And I promise you that $10 it makes an enormous difference in the quality of life for everyone involved in this, including the people on my team who are making these meals, because I think that it has helped us as a team to recognize just how privileged we are to be able to work alongside these folks to do something that's really worthwhile.
That's again so wonderful. We will put all the links, all your socials down, so anyone watching this can take a peek and see how you can support. We'd love to share that out as wide as possible. So thank you so much for being here. We are again so excited to bring this meal to life. We will put all of where you can find Kevin at the bottom. And thank you again. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you guys very much. It's been a lot of fun producing this, and I hope that anyone who gets this meal really, really enjoys it.